Hey, what's up guys? This is the McGuire Review, and today we're going to be taking a look at Boss Monster, the dungeon building card game by Brotherwise Games. This is a 2 to 4 player game, ages 13 plus, and 30 minutes on the time. I'll have to say, this is probably my favorite card game I think I've ever played. There's just tons of stuff here that appeals to me. It's got this awesome 80s 8-bit old school gaming feel to it. I absolutely love, and we'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, I absolutely love the role reversal that you get with this game. You're actually playing the dungeon. Instead of being the heroes, we'll get to here in a second, you're actually the boss and the dungeon trying to kill the heroes to win the game. So let's get into some of the components here really quick, and I'll just start right up here with some of the spells. So there's quite a few spells that are added into the game that you can use, and you'll get a certain number of those initially when you get handed your first hand of cards, and you can use those spells throughout the game. And we'll just we'll grab one here for an example, and this one's called Cave In. Destroy a room in your dungeon. Kill any hero in that room. So I'm glad I drew this one because this is a pretty powerful card. At any point in time when it's your, well, actually I'll tell you right here at the bottom, there's these symbols, and they represent either a build phase, like when you actually build your dungeon rooms, or an action phase. And this one here is actually represented by the action phase, and it says destroy a room in the dungeon, kill any hero in that room. So you can pull this spell out when a hero is actually going through your dungeon and just, boom, destroy that room and kill the hero, automatically giving you the points for, a hero being killed. And again, the way you win this game is you actually have to kill a certain number of heroes and get a certain number of what they consider soul points to be able to win before anybody else. Or the way you can lose is so many heroes get through your dungeon successfully without being able to be killed, and they have various health points attached to them. So that's how, basically your spells work. You can use those upon your turn. You can even use those upon other people's turn, depending on what type of spell that you have and what phase during the game you go through. So when you play the game, you go through a few different phases, the first being this build phase, where you're actually going to start to build your dungeon. And a dungeon can have a max of 5 rooms. And during that phase, you may build a new room if you haven't maxed out yet, or you may take a room and put it on top of another room, upgrading, or they call that more of an advanced room, making that room more powerful. You might even change what that room actually does. So it's a very interesting concept. As you go through this game, you're actually increasing the ability of your dungeon, you're making it more deadly, you're adding more traps. You may even take the strategy of setting it up to be a bunch of rooms that actually hurt your opponents when it's upon their turn. There are certain rooms where you can just blow up a room immediately on your turn, and it actually damage what will happen with somebody else, or maybe the hero that's getting drawn into their dungeon. So lots and lots of cool concepts. So all of these cards here are the various different rooms that you can build in your dungeon. I'll pull this one here really quick. It's called the Torture Chamber, and this is a trap room. There's normal rooms, trap rooms, there's advanced trap rooms, and advanced normal rooms. And again, those advanced rooms are essentially rooms that you can lay on top of normal rooms that have the same type of treasure lure. And I'll explain that here. So you see this little heart on the card. This is actually the amount of damage this room is going to do to a hero when the hero gets lured into the room. And these symbols here on the other side are the actual symbols that correspond to your hero cards. And I'll show you here in a second, the hero cards have these same type of symbols. And that's what lures them to your dungeon. So if we talk about our phases again, we start out with that build phase. And then what we actually do, we reveal those cards. And then everybody can see which type of dungeon room everybody built. And then what happens is a lure phase. There will be a certain number of heroes that will be laid out which are in town waiting to adventure. And based on the symbols that you have on your card, whoever has the most money bags or the most spell books, or there's various different types of icons that correspond to the icons on these heroes, whoever has the most of that type will draw that hero and lure that hero into their dungeon. So it may be beneficial to get heroes on a turn or not. Let's say that your dungeon isn't as powerful enough yet to kill a hero. You don't really necessarily want to draw those heroes unless there's some other type of trick you have up your sleeve. By drawing them, you're able to throw them back at another opponent, which various spells and cards in the games allow you to do those types of things. This room, destroy this room. So it's one of these kind of, you may put it down only to later in the game destroy it, because again, it only does 1 damage to any hero that gets lured into your dungeon. So this card, destroy this room, choose an opponent, that opponent discards a random room card. So again, this is really one of those screw your neighbor over kind of cards, which I love that they added that aspect into this game. I've played this game many times, and maybe one reason why I like this game so much is this is actually a game that I've never lost. I've played this game like 15 times, and I have never lost this game. So it is by far one of my favorite card games. It is by far one of my favorite card games. It is by far one of my favorite card games. One reason why. So let's move on to the characters. You'll see there's actually 2 rows of characters here. The bottom being, and that's a silver color, being your normal standard character, and the top being more of a gold color, and that is one of your more epic heroes, they call them. And essentially an epic hero, the only difference between an epic hero and a standard hero is the epic hero is going to do more damage to you if it actually gets through your dungeon, 2 blood instead of 1. And they're also going to be worth double the amount of soul points. So these are worth 2 instead of 1. So it's kind of a double hit one way or the other. And your epic heroes are generally going to have a lot more health than a standard hero would. Most of your epic heroes are going to have 10, 11, even upwards to 13, 14 health, where your standard heroes are going to have a little bit lower health. Generally between the 6 and 8 range is what a standard hero is going to have on the health. When it comes to drawing those heroes into your dungeon, it's the same concept. Your heroes do have these, and I'll show from a normal here. We referenced earlier the images here on these heroes, which are able to draw them into your dungeon based on the lure icons that are on your dungeon cards. That would be the same thing for the normal and the epic heroes. They both have this larger symbol up here in the corner of the card that says, that's what's going to lure me to a dungeon. And whoever has more of those type of symbols is who's going to lure that hero. Now, let's hit the book really quick. Within the book, it lays out the how to play, the various types of cards. It's very straightforward, the setup. It's a pretty easy game as far as the rule set that you have to play out. And quite frankly, most of anything that you would do within the game, whether it's a spell or a dungeon, that information is written right on the card. So once you understand how to use the symbols on the card, once you understand some strategy around maybe how you might want to build your dungeon, in what order, depending on how you're trying to either kind of, maybe screw somebody else over on your turn or actually lure one of the heroes to your dungeon. There's various different ways to do that. And the last thing that I'll hit here are the bosses. And there's quite a bit of different bosses that are in this game. And I really like the fact that it's not just the dungeon that you're building that can be so unique, that adds to that huge level of replayability, but you can get different bosses, and each one of the bosses have an actual ability. And what happens is, generally, on the ability, whenever the level up is triggered, and usually that's when you build your final dungeon room. So again, 5 cards make up a full dungeon, so once that dungeon is complete and you've laid that 5th card, you then can activate the power that boss may have. So just for example, I've got one of my favorite bosses here, Killa, man-eating gorilla, right? When he levels up, again, when you place that 5th dungeon card, for the rest of the game, now this is a cool one because it's for the rest of the game. A lot of them actually just are single activations, but this one is actually for the rest of the game. If you have 3 blood or more, which means 3 individual normal heroes that have made it through your dungeon, or you've had one epic hero, which is worth 2, and one normal hero, which is worth 1, which is 3. Anytime you have 3 or more, give the last room in your dungeon plus 3 health. So this is a perfect example of one of those times where if this is the boss you have and you have your dungeon out there, you may in some situations actually want to lure heroes and take damage. Because if you have more than 3 blood at any point in time, the last dungeon card in your dungeon gets a plus 3 health, which may be very beneficial to you later in the game when these epic heroes come out that have much higher health than your standard normal heroes. And that's how the course of the game will go. At a certain point in time, these epic heroes will be the only things that will start coming out of the town deck or the town area. And you'll have less and less of those normal heroes. So the game will increasingly get harder the longer that you play, or as you start to get more to that end game state. All right, I do have the expansion. They have released one expansion for the first Boss Monster game. They're actually, and I'm going to do a review on this as well, Boss Monster 2. They have released a second version of this game, which is very similar, but it does have a very different feel in the way that the heroes work. They're much more robust in the second version of the game. But, you have the option to combine the first version with the second version. I actually would not recommend that. I feel that it's a much better gameplay to play the first version of this game and then play the second version of the game, because the games do have a very, very different feel and very, very different mechanic, in my opinion, as you play it. And you do get a very different feel from it. So they do list in the rule book that you can combine those decks if you want to. I just personally recommend that you do not, because they both have a very different and a very fun feel to them. Getting back to the expansion that was released for this first one here, which was called Tools of Hero Kind, it's mainly you get a couple more spells, you get a few more room dungeon cards, and then you get a bunch of these item cards. And these item cards are things that get added to your heroes. So now it's another layer of gameplay where now the heroes have items, and those items can affect the heroes and can affect things in the dungeon and can affect the gameplay. So it was a very interesting small expansion to release to this game, and I feel that it fits perfectly with this version of the game. I'd love to see more of these come out. I mean, we got Boss Monster 2 came out last year. I picked up at Gen Con. I will be at Gen Con this year. I'd love to see a Boss Monster 3. I don't know if that's in the works for this year or not. If it's not, I'd love to see a Boss Monster 3 out into the future and just keep these things coming. Such a great implementation of this artwork, this art style. It just, I'm an 80s kid, so this was very appealing to me. I'm a big fan of the big old school 8-bit games. So when this game came out and had that art style and that feel, and especially with the replayability, again, let's get into the final thoughts. 8-bit feel, killer, the role reverse, you're the dungeon, you're not the hero, and the boss abilities. It all adds a huge amount of replayability to this game, and I have had a blast every single time I have played this. This has been the McGuire Review. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys later. I'm Batman.